What's up, everyone? Today we have a old tiller. Think it's a Troy Bilt. Pretty sure it's a Troy Bilt. It should be Troy Bilt. But anyway, it has the problem of it will run, obviously because a new motor. Someone took the time to do that, and it, for whatever reason though, will not have any. The wheels work, but when going uphill, they kind of stop. As well as the tines, when you put them in the dirt, they don't stop, or they don't run. They'll spin, mostly, but they won't actually do any tilling. So if it was just the tines, I would say there's probably more of a problem. But because the wheels also have a hard time, and the tread is on right, all that's okay, then it should be fine. Considering that we don't have the problem with we do have the problem with the wheels. I don't think it's what I'm thinking of. But before we continue on what I do think it is, we need to explain what I don't think it is. Basically, the engine transfers rotation through the transmission, which then disperses it through the wheels and the tines and everything. In there's a shaft that goes to the tines, and that connects to like a worm gear. That worm gear then makes the tines move and tills. Well, two possibilities. There is a bearing on the end of that shaft that keeps it steady. That can fail, or it could be your gear. To be honest, I don't know which one's worse. If it's the gear, you are looking at a pretty hefty cost. If it is the bearing, it's a lot cheaper, but it's a whole lot more work. How to tell is if the wheels work and there's a little play in the tines, probably have a problem with the gear. There's no play in the tines and the wheels don't work, so I suspect, getting to the point, we have a problem with the belt. Now, as you can tell, there are two slots for this belt. There's technically two belts on this machine, or at least there should be. And this is on the front belt location. And if you look up, it's going to the second, which tells me that either it's so loose that it literally is slipping off. I don't think so. I think the person who put this on didn't want to buy two belts, or did buy two belts, because I've got two of the wrong size belts and figured they'll take a little of the slack out, and by putting it in the wrong location. So either way, it's not going to work. That's not good. So we need to take it off. That's not the easiest thing to do. You can do this in a couple of ways. I prefer to just take off the belt and shove it through the side and put a new one on. It should be okay. It's relatively clean there, so it's not too much of a problem. You can take the pulley off. That's easier said than done, trust me. And that doesn't seem right now, does it? Is this spinning freely? Let me look at something. So this is spinning freely. That's not good, because that is supposed to touch down here, which then will, in certain occasions, primarily reverse, I believe. Don't quote me on that. It will allow you to go into reverse. If it spins freely, that's not going to happen. It's just going to sit there. So at the very least, when they replace this motor, maybe this is not compatible with this machine. So we either have to remove the bolt and put a spacer in there, or get a different bolt that will fit. So let me see what would be the best option. To make it easier on myself, I took the spark plug out and I put some old clean rope in there though. Don't want to have dirt all over it. What that does is it jams up the piston. You can get special piston stops and everything, don't get me wrong, but I just would rather have a soft rope. Okay, well, I'm gonna get this taken off. I think we've discovered a problem. I took it out, and this is what we have in there. It's cross-threaded pretty heavily. I'm hoping that the threads in there are not super bad. I'm going to see if I can find a good bolt and put it in there and see if it is. If not, this just became a whole lot more of a process. So we're going to have to take that off anyway. I had pulled this out a pretty decent amount, which allowed me to put the belt in the first one, but not over the bottom. It's sticking out both ends, so you can tell. Now that's important because that's the front belt. We can't unfortunately cross the belts. I mean, that's just not how physics work, unless you know a different type of rules than I do. But now, since it's in that area, we're gonna kind of press it in as much as we can. Like I said, this is not very easy, but it's, in my opinion, the easiest way. Now that we have it, there's these bolts that kind of help us hold the belt in a certain location, the mounting bolts. So now that we have that there, we take our other belt, we're gonna shove it through. Not the old one, the new one. Okay, now that we have that in, we're going to go to the other side. We're going to pull this out as much as we can. Now, the belt is kind of getting caught on the pulley. So basically, I'm going to take a small screwdriver and help guide it out of the way. Now we want to push this down. I'm going to work on getting it over this bottom pulley and then bring it back. Something I forgot to mention is this does go up, this whole lever. That's to put tension on the belt, just for the actual movement of it. You're going to want to push it all the way down. And sometimes you can adjust this if you need more room. I didn't, so I didn't really bother. You would have to take it all the way off though. It's a giant pain. I generally don't see the need, so I don't. So the first one that's over here is on. Now we take this one, which I pushed all the way through the other side, make it a little easier. We're going to push this down over this side, and then on the bottom just pull it onto the actual pulley there, and with any luck, that's it. Okay, I took the string out so I can free So that's good. Let's put this up. Man, do you ever know you're getting old when you just do something random and it hurts? You don't know why. Like, I literally just turned my head a little bit and twisted my knee when moving. Okay, so that is in gear technically. And we are good. Okay, so I'm gonna put on the back. Let's see what we have. Just realized I didn't even go over the story of this machine. So the story is, person bought it at a yard sale, and in that yard sale, the person said, "Oh yeah, it runs great. I even put a new motor on it for you," which by itself would be like, "Oh, that's nice, thank you." Looks like we have a little bit of a problem with the alignment. So the person thought it was relatively safe to buy. I mean, probably. I told him a few things about, what to look for and whatnot, and for the most part he got it all right. But, every now and then something is happening. He actually bought it for a friend because he knew his friend was needing one. Very good friend. And the friend was like, "Oh no, sorry, I don't need it anymore." It's like, "What?" "Yeah, I don't need it anymore. I got one." It's like, "Oh, do you get a better one than this one?" He's like, "Yeah, probably." And I have no idea if he did. Probably not. But so then he's like, "Okay, well, looks like I'll just keep it, or maybe I'll sell it. Who knows? Try to use it." Wouldn't work. Engine turns on just like the guy said. Oh, right now I have to refill the plug hole with line. So you're gonna hear me talk while I do so. So that's how we found out it didn't work. Now this engine most definitely does not belong on something of this age. This engine is probably only a few years old. This machine is probably older than I am, based on the patina and the general design of it. The engine that came on this is most likely either 8 horse, probably either a Tecumseh, potentially a Briggs. There's other one too, I forgot what it was, but definitely not this one. This is a 7 horsepower Kohler. Now, there's nothing wrong with Kohlers, don't get me wrong, but it's not exactly the right one. It's not going to provide you the same experience that you would have if you had the original engine. Okay, so I'm going to tighten that down. It appears to be going in straight. Now, the pulley, I can't see it very well, but assuming that they put it on right, there's not really a wrong way. I mean, there is, I suppose. It'd be really hard to do, but see how the thicknesses are different? This is a lot wider, this is a lot thinner. The opposite's on the bottom, so it makes it a little tricky to put the belt on if you do it the other way. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten that down and we'll give it a test. So this is a part I wasn't sure if I was going to show, but this is the kill switch. Now it's hard to imagine, but let's come over here. This isn't the carb. It's one very similar that I stole a part off of, and I'll explain why. But this goes right here, and then the fuel shutoff is actually your engine cutoff, because it will touch this, ground it, so on and so forth. And that wire is right here. That actually broke off, so I'm installing a new one off the old carb, the one that's right there, and it's going to require a little bit of a modification. There was this plate, let's see, is it this one? Yeah, this plate over it, but it doesn't really need it. That will just slide right on and it should be fine. The only other thing is it won't have a kill, so what I'm doing is I'm taking just a standard rocker switch, or at least something I would call a rocker switch. I'm going to install it there. My concern is the cable might be too long and potentially might get tangled in the flywheel fins. I don't want that to happen, so I'm gonna look and see if I do have to shorten it. If I do, then I'll just put new butt connectors on and whatnot. But I do have to cut this into a acceptable shape, because you know, if any parents out there know, but you can't shove not effectively a rectangle in a circular hole. So hopefully everyone remember that from when they were young, or if you have kids. So I'm going to go ahead and get that cut out, put it back on, installed. That's not that hard to do. It's just, I'm going to use like a Dremel, and this video is probably long enough as it is, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll show you the after effect. Got everything put on, switch is on, carb is on. Like I said, it's not going to have a little shield, but really the only thing that shield does is kind of tells you how to turn on the choke, as well as turns off the machine. But there's a switch now, so we don't have to worry about that. It's in neutral as well as in the middle of the travel. The belts get taut. That's the reason why we had to change them. And that rubber disc that we were looking at earlier is the one that's in reverse. So when the belts are not taut and the disc is not touching, even if it was in gear, it can be moving. But even then, you don't want to leave it in gear. Leave it in neutral. So that's what it is. Let's give it a try. Now, like I said before, if it even touched concrete, it wouldn't even move. So I don't really have anything to tilt up right now, but I do believe this is going to work. So at least if I touch concrete and the blades don't stop, I know we are in pretty good shape. And if the person, I'll let them know I don't have a way of testing it. If it doesn't work, please bring it back. I'm not going to charge you, and sorry for the inconvenience, but I'm pretty sure it's okay. Let's give it a pull. I think that's choke. Fuel is on. Perhaps the fuel is the opposite on the new one. I don't remember how this goes, but let's keep trying. Do we have fuel? The plot thickens. When I got this, the little oil was cut off. Well, the sensor was unplugged. There's no spark until I unplug it. Then there is spark. I looked in there. There is oil, but it's low. I let it sit overnight for last night, and it did leak a little oil. I thought it was gear oil, just fresh. But when looking at the towel and kind of smelling it later, I do believe it's engine oil. Somewhere there's a leak. This engine might have a crack in it. I don't know. It's not leaking anywhere that I personally can see, but considering how when they put it together, they just rammed in the bolt. Maybe they did the same thing for the back plate. I don't know. I don't see any obvious cracks. And it very well could be the seal. This is at an angle. Maybe the seal is leaking. So not really sure. What I do know is I'm going to clean it up. I'm going to tighten everything down. Well, I did. Let's give it a try. If we see anything, hear anything weird, we know we're going to stop. But for the time being, I think we should be okay. If it is a seal, it's not the end of the world. Engine has to come off, a seal replaced, but that's not too difficult. I'm going to assume that is on fuel on. Just one surprise after another. Definitely leaking more. See a drip. Let that fill up a little bit. Assuming that's filling up. We are not in gear. It's not touching. Should be free spinning. Plug is on. Might have a carb issue. Let's see what's going on here. It's a day later, and something too that I discovered. It's gonna be a groundbreaker for some people, I'm sure, but believe it or not, engine runs better with fuel. I know, it's a hard one. The tank itself had fuel, but the fuel was in the little cavity that kind of is there to trap junk. But the fuel filter wasn't able to actually reach that fuel, so it was effectively out of fuel. So put more in. That's a minute or two ago. Also had to sit overnight because when I discovered this, it was pretty late and I was a little lazy. I decided to leave it because I also have an oil issue to deal with. So let's figure it out later. Looked at it. It is not dripping from the engine. It's dripping from somewhere down the center of the transmission. I looked at the fill. It's pretty high. I have a feeling that whoever thought there was a problem overfilled the transmission thinking maybe there was oil needed. I don't know. And it's also really thin. It should be a lot thicker. So I tried to pump out as much as I could, and I put the appropriate what I took out back in. It is still a little high. I would rather have it be a little high and leak a little bit more comparison to having been a little low and not leaking. So having said that, at least we don't have an engine problem, which is really surprising considering there was a little to no oil in the engine. But it's leaking down the center, and I originally had thought that it was just falling down the engine side, the engine somewhere, and then kind of working its way downhill, and downhill was where it just kind of dripped once it got to the lowest point. But the path it would have to take is down here, and it's dry down here, I mean. So yeah, it's also dry in the bottom too, so it's not like it's either on the inside, it could be on the outside, but on the outside it's also dry. Having said that, let's give it a pull. Let's make sure this is in neutral. There we go. That's touching. There we go. Okay. Last thing we want is get ran over. Oh, you know what? It helps if I turn the fuel on. At least I think that's fuel on. Let's see here. Yeah, it's fuel on. Make sure nothing's leaking. Because before I go through the carb and deal with all that nonsense, I would rather just put fuel in it and see if that was the problem. Because I've heard this run, and it had no issue running. And it wasn't that long ago. I suppose there could have been something in the tank. Seemed okay though. Pretty sure this is on right there. I might have a carb problem to begin with. Let's try this again. Excuse me. Not 100% sure this is the reason why, but this piece was the part that helps control the flow of fuel when you turn it off and on. It's a gasket, it kind of keeps it from leaking. It was a little tore up, so I replaced it with the one off the Honda carb. And so when I turned the fuel on with the bowl off and the whole sediment bowl off as well, nothing was coming out. So I cleaned that out. Excuse me, no, with the sediment bowl off, it was coming out through just the top. It wasn't going anywhere else. Put everything back together. Now, hopefully it's okay. The sediment bowl did do its job though. There was definitely pieces of sediment in there, so yeah. Well, that's a lot better. I have a feeling that this transmission is just garbage. Did you see that? Should not be doing that. Unless that has anything to do with it. I don't think so. I think that's just a gear. But let's try. I could be wrong though. I've never actually seen one with that on there. But let's try it. Still on neutral. Okay, good. Try this again. Okay, so what does that tell me? What does that tell me? It tells me that transmission's bad. So that shifter on the other side is showing, or I was using, is for turning off and on the tines. When it's down, like it is not right now, only the wheels run. Real wheels run good. There's no issue with those. When you turn the lever down, like it's not, the tines turn on, and unfortunately you hear that amazing noise. So in here there's a gear underneath. Let's see if you can see that. Yeah, underneath there. So rotation's going. It's going all the way through here, and then in the center where the tines come out, there is a gear. I think it's brass. Could be something else. It's usually pretty soft metal. So That then in turn, of course, turns to tines and all that. So when this ends up happening, there's usually two things that go wrong. One, that gear strips out and you have this problem. Or two, the bearing on the other end holds that shaft from going up and down goes out. Either one is due to lack of lubrication. The fact that it's leaking a lot of lubrication everywhere kind of tells me that A, the person knew about it, B, didn't do anything about it, C, probably ran it with nothing, D, had a problem, wanted to put more in, and then E, yeah, it's now here. So unfortunately, this is, I don't want to say trash, but it's definitely expensive to fix. The bearing is a whole lot cheaper, but the bearing is something that you do not want to have to replace. To get it out is not easy. I mean, I've done it. It's an all-day process, it feels like. In fact, I'm pretty sure it is an all-day process, but it can be done. The gear is a lot easier because you do have to take the gear off anyway to get to the bearing, so that one's not that hard. The problem is that gear is really expensive. So I'm gonna do some quick gandering on prices and see what's going on. Okay, did a little research. It's actually a lot cheaper than I thought. But let's go down this rabbit hole. If it's the bearing on here, actually, let's just go over the gear first. It's about $55 just for the, trying to find it. Yeah, just for the brass gear. Okay. $55. To get in there, you're gonna have to replace a seal. Seal kit is about $20, so about $75. It's not too bad. That's assuming that's the only thing that's wrong in there. If it's the actual shaft with the worm gear on it, or at least what I would call the worm gear, that's completely different. That I couldn't really find too many of them, mainly because the reason why the big gear is brass is because they do want to make sure that's the one that breaks instead of that one, because it's a lot different. I mean, it's a lot easier to replace, let's just put it that way. At least that's how I would assume. It could be a completely different reason. Maybe it's just more expensive. Probably there's a whole lot less metal that would be required, but that's what it looks like. So, oh, excuse me, $45, $47. So you're looking at roughly like $70 to replace that. If it's a bearing, that one's a little cheaper. But you still have to do the whole seal kit. That's not to mention you also, for both these, have to be getting some gear oil. So I'm going to talk to the owner, see what's going to go on, and see what they want to do. But if you are having this problem, this is definitely a good place to start looking. Which is really odd. I was not expecting this. Not at all. Usually it's just the belt, especially since the wheels work. But I guess that would make sense. The wheels are a completely different set of gears, so I guess my original thought was wrong. So shame on me. I didn't put two and two together. But at the very end, I can probably salvage these belts. It's not that hard to take them off, as you saw. And I'm not too worried about it on that case. So, okay. Well, unfortunately, you can't fix them all. But the belts are working. So if you need to learn how to replace a belt, or if you're hearing weird crunchy noises, you now know what's going on. Hopefully we'll have a repair video on how to do this, or how to repair the gear. So I'll catch you in the next video. Subscribe, and I'll see you later. Bye.